Okay, we might make a start. So, good morning all, and welcome to the Hong Kong Institute for Advanced Study sharing session at City University of Hong Kong. My name is Matt Manning. I'm the Head of the Department of Social and Behavioural Sciences, and I'm delighted to have you join us today for the workshop How to Be Successful, led by Professor Dame Madeleine Atkins, HKIAS Senior Fellow and President of Lucy Cavendish College, University of Cambridge. Dame Madeleine brings a remarkable breadth of experience from leading Coventry University and serving as the Chief Executive of the Higher Education Funding Council for England, to steering Lucy Cavendish College's mission to widen access. So we are in expert hands today. For those of you who have read I guess you could say Agatha Christie novels, with the famous saying by Hercule Poirot, stimulating the little grey cells. Well, Professor Atkins certainly does that. 1 hour, or maybe even less than 1 hour, half an hour with Professor Atkins equals at least 1 week of reflection, which is wonderful. So this will be, an understanding how Professor Atkins works, this will be an interactive workshop style focused, practical route to success for early career researchers, both within academia and beyond. Expect candid insights on spotting and shaping opportunities and on professional attributes employers now prize. So I'm sure Professor Atkins will be happy if I say that please lean in, ask questions, share experiences, and make this a conversation. Just if you haven't already done so, please keep your mobile phones on silent during this event. With that, please join me in giving a warm City U welcome to Professor Dame Madeleine Atkins.
So good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you this morning and to be sharing this workshop-style event with you. Some of you I have already met, actually were with us at Lucy Cavendish College earlier this September, and a particular welcome to you. It's great to have you back and to have the connection and network continuing, networking being a hugely important part of achieving success these days. Very generous words from Professor Manning, but actually more relevant, I think, today. Obviously, I've gone through a career trajectory myself. I've had a PhD, many years as a postdoc, going from short-term contract to short-term contract. I understand deeply the concept of precarity, as we call it, the difficulty of actually achieving tenure, and also combining that with family responsibilities. I had 2 children in the course of that period, and it was not easy. And most of all, my bank manager was not easy, in the sense of saying, Madeleine, if you want to get a mortgage and get a house, you have to find a proper job, not going on these short-term contracts, research contracts in academia. So I have experienced much of that, and in my last 7 years at Cambridge, been very much involved with the postdoc academy and how we make a better environment for people at that early stage of an academic career. Just for context, at Cambridge there are 4,000 postdocs. It's almost the largest category of staff that we have. They undoubtedly do the heavy lifting on research across our university, and they are fundamental to our success, but their life is pretty precarious. And when I talk to them at the beginning of an academic year, and I say, put your hand up if you think you are going to have an academic career here at Cambridge, and 3/4 of them or more put their hand up, and I say, the stats are against you. 1 in 25, maybe, will become a lecturer, an assistant professor at Cambridge. The rest of you need to start thinking right now about your career, about what it is that matters to you, what you really enjoy doing, because if you are 50 and you are still on short-term contracts, Yeah, that's not necessarily a symbol of success for you, your family, or indeed for anyone else. So it really does matter that we get these environments right and that the career advice is good for people as they go through these stages. Now, I asked you to vote as you came in for what was the most important success for you. And you'll be interested to see the distribution of the stirring sticks, which we used as the ballot token. So you can see here, this is A, B, C, right? You've got your cheat sheets there. So there is a considerably greater interest in success being defined as making a contribution to major world problems than actually to breakthrough. So the first three, in my view, are all aspects of a traditional and splendid academic career: breakthrough, building out a new field, and then implementing positive research results into government, community, commerce, whatever. But here is where you voted hugely. Major world problems, making a contribution. Let me get my cheat sheet, hang on a second. Publishing and researching with international peers, got a fair number, but not huge. As I said a moment ago, networking really important for certain types of academic career. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 in there. By the way, the member of our colleague here who broke up her stick into 6 bits, I am not counting in this analysis, okay? Really enterprising, that. Moving into interdisciplinary research, now that's interesting. That only got 3 votes. I'll come back to that point in a minute, because for me, that relates very strongly to the one that got the most votes, which is making a contribution to world problems. Interdisciplinarity is indeed problematic we'll come back to that and why in a minute. Academic career with teaching and research and administration. We have a few future heads of department here. A few. Combining a career with family responsibilities, massive votes. And I'll come back to that for sure in a minute. And then a career in research policy, think tanks, government, 1. And that's interesting because there are, in the last 2 decades, there have been new research career pathways opening up around what is here as J. But it doesn't, it's not having much attraction for you this morning. Okay, let me go into a little more detail on some of these. So the first 3, A, B, and C, are, as I indicated a moment ago, really parts of the research endeavor, the classic traditional research endeavor, perhaps particularly in the 1 and 2 in the sciences, and C, almost certainly more in the social sciences. So here's a hypothesis, and I don't know whether this is true here in City U or not, but normally I would say that if you're into breakthrough, join a small research group. Small, agile, fast-thinking, fails fast, works fast, fails fast if that's a requirement, often it is, but small. Most breakthroughs come from small. Hypothesis. On the other hand, if you enjoy the sense of building up a field, of perhaps taking what was a theoretical paper and turning it into an experimental design, or picking up some early experimental results, seeing what the issues are, what the problems are at that point, and then devising clever, neat experiments that scale up whatever it is that has been found and so on, then you're a B-type researcher, and we need you too. On the whole, B-type researchers are in large research groups. And in a college or a department or a university as a whole, one of the things that as a president, I had to think about, and as a regulator of the sector, I had to think about, was what is the optimal balance in a department between large and small research groups? And if you have a large research group, at what point should you be encouraging it to split and to allow some, particularly the junior researchers, to go off and form a small research group to take an insight into breakthrough? So those are sort of management questions that come from that. And then C, which is the implementation phase, I would argue, becoming increasingly important for governments and for taxpayers and for those who actually fund our research, and where we have to justify to those agencies our continuation and our demands for ever greater money for financing, implementation, and the evidence of positivity that comes from that implementation, really, really important in policy terms. And there are researchers who are really great on the implementation part. They like going out there and putting it into practice. It might be in the commercial sector, for example, in big pharma, going from a PhD in a university to research labs in big pharma, for example, or it may be taking a new policy that it has a social implication to improve whatever it might be, some social inequity, and actually try it out with real people in the real world and begin to understand that the messiness and the sometimes unintended consequences of new policies as they are put into practice. We need all three, of course, of A, B, and C. Now, I'm interested in D, and how strongly you endorsed D, because almost every university in the world now says that it's part of, at least, if not its main objective, is to make a contribution to solving a major world problem. And indeed, often in their literature, they cite the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for example. And there is a further point, which is, given you may well want some international aspect to your career trajectory, and the world is facing a number of geopolitical tensions, then it is issues like climate change, the acidification of the ocean, and so on, which actually transcend those problems and enable researchers still to work across different countries and to form groups that go across political divides. So there's also a kind of second benefit there, which is worth remembering. I will say a little bit later on, a little bit more about the Anthropocene, and you can look it up on your phones. Oh no, you're not allowed to use your phones. You can look it up in a minute if you haven't heard the concept. It is controversial. Yes, okay, so co-researching and co-publishing, that is, of course, part of how you demonstrate status, readiness to be promoted. Getting grants and getting published are the twin poles around which the academic globe spins, I would say. And it is a truth that how you are regarded in your field by your peers in other universities, in other countries, matters usually more to you than how your peers in a different department in the same college view you. Ultimately, in terms of your trajectory, career trajectory, it is the peer review that actually wins the day. And certainly in publishing, your articles, if you submit, which I hope you are, your articles will be reviewed usually for the top journals, the high H-factor journals, by an international peer group. So that absolutely does matter. Whether in the next 10 years, because of the way that governments are thinking about research in universities, having more evidence around C will matter more in internal promotion is, I think, an open question. But at the moment in most universities, if you're on the article that's in Nature, that matters. That's a shining star. Okay, the next one was this movement from focused research into interdisciplinary research. And I said I was interested that didn't get many votes, even though a lot of you wanted to be making a contribution to world problems. And I think your voting is reflective of an actuality that we all face at the moment, which is that, of course, you need a base, a strong base in your field. You've got to be confident, you've got to be on top of it, you've got to understand it, you've got to be able to do the math or whatever it is in terms of the advanced research tools that your field is currently using. You've got to have that. The issue then is if you are interested in working with people in other disciplines, how best to go about that. And we use these words like interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity a little bit interchangeably, but that's probably lazy of us conceptually, because true interdisciplinarity requires a bringing together of methodologies, of tests for truth, of techniques, of ways of analyzing and making sense of data. And those of you who have a tendency to be more generalist than specialist will find it easier to do that. So let me give you an example, certainly from my own background. So I read law and history at Cambridge as an undergraduate, and it didn't take me long to work out that the way we handled documents in the law faculty was entirely different from the way I was expected to analyze historical primary source material. Okay? When I so my research field became ed tech for a while, and there it became very obvious to me that if we were working on how to improve learning outcomes by using ed tech more effectively in classrooms, then actually I needed to be much, much better at understanding the way psychologists worked, and indeed how those who were at that time beginning to do neuroscience and the ways in which memory was stored, et cetera, worked, as well as understanding algorithms for the compression of digital video and C++. Okay, that dates me. This was when C++ came out. Object-oriented programming. Wow, it was amazing. Very old-fashioned now. But also understanding what were the constraints around this new programming language called C++, and how could we improve video compression, digital video compression, so that actually we could develop materials which could run on a reasonably low bandwidth. So there we were immersed in quite a few different fields, and it was not enough just to have a psychologist on the team and somebody who was a good programmer on the team. We actually had to understand far more than that to actually achieve our ambition. So I do think it's tough, and I'm not sure how good we are in universities at providing opportunities in the early career stage to experience true interdisciplinarity, as opposed to just trotting along to a group which has one of several disciplines represented in it. The next G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, I'm going to have to apologize to President Bowie, because there are not going to be very many extremely effective startups from this group, only 3 maybe here. I span out a company from a research group. And I have to say, for me, that was the most exciting year of my life, absolutely. Forget working with government, forget going to number 10 Downing Street, et cetera, That was an amazing year. And the sense of achievement for setting something up, seeing it grow, getting funding in, getting the team, everybody had a share and so on and so on. That was amazing. And it was, I used that experience many times over subsequently when I was responsible for getting student entrepreneurship up and running across the UK. I didn't stay in it though, partly because we got funding for the first stage. This is quite easy pretty much everywhere now, certainly in Hong Kong, certainly in mainland China. Much more difficult then to get second stage funding, and we had to sell the company in what is known as the Valley of Death to a large French multimedia concern. And I didn't want to work in a large French multimedia company. And so I went back into the university at that point, and indeed was then given responsibility for enterprise and entrepreneurship. It's funny how these things happen. But I would say, actually, if you've reached a point in your research where you can see an opportunity actually to commercialize, it is worth having a thought about it. It would also be fair to say, I think in Hong Kong, also in the US, certainly in the UK, maybe in Australia, it is often the case that a startup from a university with the PI or the group from the research group, however that's set up, there comes a point when the investor may well replace you if you were the PI and the first kind of person in charge of the company. And they will bring in somebody with commercial experience to take it into the next stage and the next stage. And you become a kind of advisor to the company. That is quite a familiar territory. And I know it also happens here in Hong Kong, as well as in the UK. So this is an example of a problem of doors. There are some, and I get this from the tech bros, okay. Some decisions that you take in your career can be reversed. It's like a two-way door. You have a go, you enjoy it and so on, but you then go back into academia or you, whatever. Some decisions you take are one-way doors. And when you've gone through that door and you've made that decision, you have actually set your career path out on a different trajectory. And understanding which of those this opportunity in front of you is quite important indeed to just step back and think about it. Yep, obviously most of you here are hoping for a career that does not require you to be head of department. Those of us here who have been heads of department, deans and so on, can sympathize with that view. But I have to say, many of you will at some point be offered the opportunity to take on a management role of some sort. And all I would ask then is that the university provides really good management training, because if you take that step, then you really do need to understand and to be familiar with and to engage with the whole human resource end, and indeed the current research policies in that area behind devising, managing environments that encourage creativity, curiosity, the things that define a world-class, effective department or college. And that's not necessarily the same as the management skills in a company, I would suggest. Family responsibilities. This session was initially meant to be for women. Sorry, guys, but you should know this too. I think this is one of the most problematic areas of university management that we've got on our plates today. So I think I said in my career, I'm married, and we had 2 children. Absolutely at a point in my career when there was a door decision. And I think this is the issue. So for most women, our peak time for reasonably straightforward conception is around your 20s and maybe into your early 30s. That's also the time, typically, if you're in university career, where you're looking to establish tenure, or indeed, having got tenure, to establish yourself for the first rounds of promotion beyond. If you've gone from your PhD into, let's say, one of the big consultancy companies, or into a finance company or an investment company, that's the period where you move from being a junior to having clients of your own, and to being given some of the more important projects that the company is developing. And if you come out at that point, you lose that opportunity. So I think this is a really tricky set of issues. And from the point of view of universities, what one is looking for in terms of management is what are the flexibilities that this university or this department or this college has introduced that makes the decision process at that time in one's life easier, more flexible, more a two-way door rather than just a one-way door. My first pregnancy, okay, I took maternity leave early, big mistake. Should have carried on teaching right up to the moment of the blue lights and the ambulance. But I took maternity leave early, had the baby. Then I had to come back pretty quickly into the university because the mat leave had finished. I came back, and on the first day back, they said, "Oh, Madeleine, while you're away, we decided you would be the next head of department." Yeah, never say yes at that moment. I said yes at that moment. Whatever, you may put that down to baby brain. You'll get all these things alleged against you. But I said yes. Okay, fine, I'll give it a go. And actually, I never got back into my ed tech research. That was, it turned out, a one-way door. And then when I had the second baby, I came back and they made me dean. There's a kind of pattern here. And at that point, that was fine, because I had effectively made a decision. I didn't quite realize it at the time, but I had actually made a one-door through decision. And then that's fine, dean, vice president, president, that all fell in line. So I do think it's worth, in the management of universities, really thinking hard. I'll give you another example. We explored it in the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences on Monday, which is the policy, for example, on sabbaticals. Frequently, you have to have done so many years or months, and you earn so many months of sabbatical. That's kind of commonplace across universities. What it doesn't do, usually, is say, right, you've had a period of mat leave, now you can have a sabbatical to catch up your field. And depending on your field, that really matters, because some fields move so fast that being out for 6 months or 9 months means you're kind of on the back foot. And also, having a young baby, unless you have family help, or you can afford other kinds of help, it's really hard to go to international conferences. I have tried breastfeeding at an international conference. Believe me, I was made to feel really odd. This was a tech conference, okay? But you can't say, okay, I can do this. But it's not that straightforward. And my own view is that we have a long way to go in universities, really to think about how you make the mat leave door a two-way door, genuinely a two-way door, if the person wishes to be an A, B, or C person, rather than going at that point into management. So that's the challenge, I think. If you go, and I know this for our alumni from the college at Cambridge that I was president of, we have quite a lot of alumni here in Hong Kong, women, very smart, very bright, now in their mid to late 20s. When I have dinner with them, first thing they talk about in their companies, and they're all in international, multinational companies, those companies now offer them the right, if they want it, to freeze their eggs. So that gap from 25 to 35 is available to them to continue their career in the company alongside and in genuine competition with the men. And they talk a lot about this, not only because it's quite a big decision, but also, of course, because the fertility rate from frozen eggs is nothing like as good as conception rights, or your ability to conceive in your 20s. Nonetheless, it's interesting that is an offer. It's one of the benefit packages. So I tried this out on the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences on Monday, Professor Manning, and I said, does City U do this? So complete and utter silence. And I don't actually know in the UK either of a university that's really thought about this. But I put it out there. The big multinational companies understand that if they really want diversity in that middle management, and then that's going to go through to the top levels of management, they have to understand women's reproductive cycles and rights better than they're doing now. Okay. And none of you, or one of you, wanted a career in research, policy, strategy, or administration. I think that this is a kind of coming theme, in as much as I see new career opportunities in think tanks, in government, in universities, also around research prioritization, research strategy, research implementation, or implementation of that policy, analysis of data. So data analytics coming through really strongly in the area that Jay now inhabits. And on the whole, it is people with PhDs and postdoc experience who are hired into those career pathways. Whether they will lead to be a president of a university, I don't know yet. I just simply put out there that this seems to me to be an emerging area that's of interest. Could I? Oh, hang on. That's right. That's right. There is. Yay! God knows what I've done with the pointer. There it is. Sorry. Thank you. So the point I wanted to make, which is very obvious now, is that success is a relative concept. And the important thing is that you know for you what success looks like, or might look like, and that you have a certain amount of flexibility, openness, and adaptability to other career options or to different ways of thinking about success stemming from a research-based career. I apologize. No, I'm not sure I do apologize. So this is ChatGPT generated. Of course it is, as a visual. And I said, okay, give me X, gave it a couple of prompts, said, turn them all into women. Now, time for you to do a little bit more thinking. So, this was another ChatGPT. I think, I don't know if anybody is into literature here, but I hit ChatGPT in developing this session when it was in a dark Gothic mood. Lots of, lightning and thunders and peaky, jaggy mountains. Whatever I tried in the prompts seemed to come up with it. So here you are. So there are three groups here of questions. And I'll gloss them a little bit, and then I'm going to get you in groups to discuss them a bit more. And the first is about transferability of research skills. This is often superficially talked about. And I'm not sure it's as easy as you might think. But the question that some of you will look at in a minute is actually, how transferable are my research skills? I see in Cambridge, and we get some fabulous people who've got their doctorates coming in to do postdoctoral work, particularly in labs. For the first 9 months of their contract as a postdoc, is kind of head in hands while they have very fast to acquire new lab techniques, new analysis tools of analysis, and so on. So we talk blithely about, well, you finish this research project, you go on to a next one. But if the funding finishes in your research project, and now you're looking round for the next step, it's important to think about that. And also to know what you would turn down, as well as what you might consider in an adjacent field, should it be offered to you. The second, the blues here, is trying to test out some of your risk-taking attitudes, really. So this is, and I've taken this from a funding body in the UK called ARIA, which has just decided it is going to have fellowships that have no strings, really, attached to them at all. So if you've got a good idea, just an idea, you can go to ARIA and say, look, I've got this idea. Might work, might not work, but I've got this idea. And they will give you a stipend for a year based in one of the, based at Cambridge or one of the leading research-based universities, just to think, research, go talk to people, and see if that idea has legs. They're called frontier fellowships. And they have some others too. They have blue sky fellowships and so on. So I've just used that as an example behind the blue. And then the pink there is something else that may well be offered to you, the opportunity for a secondment into industry or into government or into a charity for a period, to take what you know, your research and so on, and to work with them on whatever it is their priority. And I put that there because at one point in my career, I had fallen out with my dean badly. I was always troublesome to have around. So eventually there was this opportunity to go for a year into the nuclear and electricity industry. Now, I'm a historian stroke social scientist. I know absolutely nothing about the atomic physics at the base of nuclear. But it was an opportunity, and it got me out from under the dean. And the dean was very pleased for me to take this. He moved on, and I became dean after him. I just put that down there for whatever. So I signed it, sort of contract. I was to be given £1 million to try and do something about the high school science curriculum. I'm an educator. Which the industry thought was pretty boring and was turning off people from careers in science. It was so boring. I mean, really, you don't need to learn the periodic table. You can look it up, was their view. And here we were kind of pushing teenagers through a structured, myopic curriculum in science. So I would have £1 million to really see if I could do something to make the curriculum exciting. I signed. Nobody had ever given me £1 million before. And the next week, Chernobyl popped its lid. And the whole of Europe convulsed around the dangers of nuclear power, around what we were going to do with this radioactive cloud, which was now moving east to west. People, Madeleine, you, for God's sake, don't go and work in the nuclear industry now. But I did. And it was, in many ways, enormously instructive because, in addition to working on the curriculum, I was at first hand, could see how a government reacts to a massive public issue, and also how the public perceive risk, and what one does on the economic strategy when something like this happens. Because at that point, we were going we were just about to take the electricity and nuclear industry into privatization. This was the Thatcher era. And in the end, we decided it was so risky, we couldn't take the nuclear bit, which stayed in public ownership, but we privatized electricity, starting with the grid. So, I didn't know anything about politics at this level, but for a year, quietly in the corner of the room, I was there in the media sessions, in the sessions in Parliament, in the sessions out in the industry itself. I learned more in that year about media than I would have learned in 10 inside the university. So, right, now, time for you to think a little bit about this. So I'm going to ask, you're going to hate me, aren't you? I'm going to ask those of you on this quadrant here, right, you're the black questions, okay? I'm going to ask those of you here to do the blue questions. You can swivel your chairs and to engage with people behind you. I'm going to ask everybody here to do the pink questions, and you lucky lot here can take your choice as whether you're black, blue, or pink, but beware, I will ask you for feedback. So this area, swing around, make some more groups. Everybody clear? Right, go. Chat, discuss. Oh, you're very well behaved. Thank you. I'm calling it in at this point, and I'm not going to go around every group and ask them, for their words of wisdom, because that becomes extremely boring after a while. But I hope that that's given you just a little moment in which to begin to think about some of the opportunities and choices that you are likely to have to face at some point in the next sort of period of your career. I'm going now just to put a few more thoughts across to you, and then we will close. Oh, I keep doing that by mistake. Hang on. Elusive. Here we go. Now, one of the things that I find interesting at Cambridge is when we talk to the employers of our PhDs and our postdocs, not just other universities, but actually employers in the commercial sector, the public or government sector, and indeed the civic, what I would call civic society, social society sector. One of the things they say is, oh, Madeleine, you say these people are brilliant, and sure they're brilliant, but they are lousy hires for us. And when we explore that a bit more, several things come out. The first is this, that a focus through a PhD and postdoc can be extremely narrow. And those graduates, those postdocs, find it hard to situate the research they've been doing in the wider global context. And the sorts of things that they may not have really sat back and considered is how their research relates to some of the big things, the big themes that are shaping our society, our economy, and indeed international relations. And here's just a few examples. Obviously, climate change. Not just the pictures, we'll come to those in a moment, but also what's happening around the legal frameworks of climate change, the financing of mitigations of climate change, regulation, the law of the sea, and so forth. Also, there is a sense in which you can, through a PhD, postdoc, and so on, kind of, you read the news and you can see what's going on a bit, but actually understanding how your research may be perceived in global tension and geopolitical terms is pretty important. And increasingly, as we go through this period, those issues are becoming more and more salient. Simple things like, can you even get a visa? Much more serious things like, here's a list of prohibited organizations. You may not take money and work with researchers from these organizations. In the national interest, you may not do so. So having that kind of understanding is pretty important. And then, of course, the world is going data-driven, the whole AI, if you believe that, the fourth industrial revolution, understanding how you are using AI. Employers absolutely need you to know that. And also, to some extent, then, the ethics around AI, the fact that where intellectual property stands in relation to your work, if it's in the internet and so on, if it's scraped, if it's used to train a large language model, actually what's happened to your IP, those things matter a lot. So, ethical leadership, and there are no doubt others. And I've just put this up. I mentioned the Anthropocene. That's a contested term, and it's also a matter of discussion where you think the Anthropocene starts, though many people would say from the ice core analysis that it started at sort of the first industrial revolution, round about there. And I put this slide up. You're all familiar with these kinds of pictures. Refugees, the desecration of the planet, the biosphere on which all life depends, acidification of the oceans and warming, conflict, massive increase in conflict in the last 20 years, mega cities, we've never seen anything like that on the globe before, and these are all problems of success. Success from the last 200 years or so, where we have lifted people out of poverty, cured many diseases, found ways to mitigate other diseases, have found ever better ways to extract the Earth's natural resources and turn them into good technology and useful technology, and so on. So here's the paradox that faces scientists and indeed other researchers, and you voted. You voted overwhelmingly for this. Actually, what you're looking at is coping with the problems of success. And I don't think we've had a period in our history before when researchers have been asked to do that. It's a very interesting paradox. So I just put that up there to think about as we go on to what employers are saying that they are looking for in highly skilled graduates with PhDs, postdoc experience, and so forth. And I don't think that list is particularly surprising. It would also apply if you are looking for an associate or assistant professorship in a university. So teamwork and problem solving. We are not going to make any progress on those big, complex, climate change related, etc. problems, the things you voted for overwhelmingly, without experience of teamwork and problem solving. And so one of the things that you should be looking at when you reflect on your experience to date and what you can say to an employer, why they should hire you, is what you have learned about effective teamwork in different contexts. Being good as a team in context A is not necessarily the same as being good at a team in context B. Of course, they're looking for evidence of leadership, but also leadership that builds consensus. Not necessarily leadership where people did what they did because they were terrified of you. They never did. But there's something about consensus, particularly when you're working in interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary contexts, which is often requires different kinds of leadership skills. Of course, analysis, particularly data analysis. When we surveyed our recent graduates, this is from undergraduates, okay, going out with a first degree, what was it in their first year in employment that really they found difficult? And they all came back and said, using Excel spreadsheets, Madeleine. I went, what? But actually, this was, to be fair, this was just towards the end of COVID. Typically, the first jobs, the first projects they had been put on, whether they were in finance, whether they were in consulting, whether they were in whatever, almost right across the board, was they were given a project, they had to use, manipulate data, and then be able to tell the story of their analysis and interpretation, which is why communication comes up so quickly on this list. And it's communicating, and I put down, being an influencer. I don't mean earning your, a bit on TikTok from selling cosmetics, but actually, the skills through TikTok of influencing are really quite important and do have a transfer into the way in which you will make your mark, and employers will be interested in hiring you, because being able to influence in a mixed group, in a diverse group, are really, really important, particularly if you're junior and you're in a very structured or hierarchical situation, then your influencing skills matter even more. So influencing, being an influencer, being able to tell the story of the data. Being an innovator, of course, and the one above there, the quick study, an American term, how fast can you pick something up? So, data analysis, being an effective communicator, right up there. And of course, the resilience. One of the things employers say to us that they find difficult with hires from highly skilled graduates from Cambridge is they've never experienced failure. All through their life to this point, they've been top of the class. They got great grades at the end of high school. They got into Cambridge. It's very difficult to fail at Cambridge, by the way, but they got into Cambridge. They've probably got a first-class degree or good 2-1, a good degree, as we call it in the UK. All through, they've been fine. They've had good positive feedback. What they've done has worked. And here they are now in a commercial context, and they meet their first failure. And they find that really hard to cope with. So having resilience to actually accept the setback, emotion comes first. I would say to our students, if they get negative feedback in a small group teaching session, okay, go cry. Here's the pack of tissues. Now, once you've got over the emotion, then okay, so what was it What could I do to be better? What could I improve there? That resilience, that learning from error, hugely important to employers. And this business about making decisions, being prepared for it not to go well, being able to pivot, being able to adapt, to go into a situation that's ambiguous, no protocol, no obvious rules about what should be done, and make decisions and then be open to that feedback. Now, the scientific method, you can say, embraces that anyway. You know, we like replication studies. Things that fail are important because it teaches us more. But many graduates actually have not experienced, so individually, that kind of situation. And that's a problem. So those are the sorts of things. Oh, being open-minded, obviously, and having a global outlook these days, really important. And therefore understanding the geopolitics that are going on around us. So those are the sorts of things that I think most employers, pretty much anywhere, are looking for. And therefore, as you think about your own career and what you can evidence and what you can't, it may just be worth thinking about opportunities that you might ask your head of lab or your head of department or your mentor, whoever it is in your network that is helpful to you, some opportunities to develop these sorts of skills and competencies. So the enterprising mindset. It's a number of ways you can do things, including, of course, getting at least some of the way down, setting up a company, but not only that. And then this getting outside your comfort zone, really, really important. And some of the most talented, the most able, the most prestigious scientists in the world will tell you they have a passion, a hobby, an interest, something entirely different from their field that they love. And actually, it's important for their success that they have that. You know, that they're not just 24/7, always in the lab or always in the study, but they are learning from something completely outside their field. They're seeing patterns, they are seeing analogies and metaphors that can inform their work, but also they push boundaries. They put themselves into situations which are not comfortable, where they have to learn something new and then understand what it took to do that learning. So learning from taking risks with your thinking, with activities, whatever, pretty important, I think. Innovation we've talked about, and that creative imagination. Can you evidence that? Can you evidence how you framed a problem in a different way, how you've actually made some connections with something in an adjacent field or something in a completely different field that has led to an insight? So that kind of creative imagination, curiosity, the abiding skill and competence and personal characteristic for research, and at the end of successful teamwork, of course. So I think that's quite enough from me. I have, of course, overrun, for which apologies. Every good wish for your careers in the future, and thank you for listening.
Professor Atkins, that was an incredibly enriching workshop, and thank you very much. Every time that I hear you speak, you exceed my expectations. You have clearly a very great educator. The buzz in the room was incredible, and that was wonderful. I ask all of you to go away, find a quiet moment, and reflect upon what Professor Atkins has said. It takes that time for you to take that time to do that. And learn from her experiences. I would like to thank you, and on behalf of everyone, please accept this very small gift. And thank you once again.
You may go. Is it all right?